And welcome to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Just taking into consideration what eyewitnesses have said about how this accident happened this morning, a bus full of people going at speed on a highway. Take us through, what the permutations are when that is the case on a busy highway and a collision does take place.
Hi, good morning, first of all, and good morning to our viewers as well. The first and most important issue is there are typically 5 factors you look at in crashes of this kind. If there's any allegation of speeding, obviously that's going to probably be where the focus starts. But in order to do it properly, you'll have to go along concentric circles from really the inside outwards. So you start with the driver and the driver actions, or the so-called human factors. Was the driver in fact speeding? Remember, a bus going at 80 kilometers per hour is complying with the speed limit, but if he's on an off-ramp and it's a 60 kilometers per hour off-ramp, then he might not be. So what were the actions of the driver and what was he doing? And more importantly, what if he perhaps swerved for another vehicle that changed lanes at the last moment? So we'd have to know that. The next thing we look at is the mechanical factor, or the vehicle itself. We could have possibilities like a burst tire with buses specifically, because they're so heavy and big. If a tire bursts, there's an immediate force on the deflated tire, which can cause the bus to veer to one or the other side. So we'd have to know whether that was the case. It could be that there's a problem with the steering system on the bus and that something went wrong, and that would have to be examined. Next, you go to the actual road environment or the engineering. You look at the design of the road. Quite frankly, I've looked at some of the photographs. I've seen some of the footage. I don't see anything on the road that would have directly contributed to this. Next, you go to the environment. Now, that might either be weather, which in this case, obviously it wasn't, or the traffic environment, or the amount of traffic there is. Obviously, if there's dense traffic, such as in the morning, lower speeds would be more ideal. And more importantly, we don't know what other traffic might have done until we get a full scope of this. Next, you look at the law enforcement factors as such, which might include whether the bus is legally operated, whether it's properly fitted with seatbelts for the occupants, for instance, whether it's properly maintained, properly registered, and on the road legally. So those are the factors we'd want to look at. From what I'm seeing, I can already tell you, I've seen one news report saying the bus jackknifed. Buses cannot jackknife. Jackknife is where the truck's horse or the truck tractor in front changes in angle versus the trailer. Buses don't have that. So it's probably more a case of the bus losing control and rolling over, apparently rolling several times, according to what I've read. So then we'd have to say what causes a bus to roll several times, and we're back at the possibility of speed. But we have to first eliminate whether there was any external or any mechanical influence or contribution to this.
Yeah. Stan, what is the difference between, let's say, the accident happened exactly as it did with the bus, but it happened with a car, whether it's an SUV or a light motor vehicle? What are the differences between crashes of this nature when it's involving a passenger vehicle like a small car versus a bus or even a taxi? But let's go with the bus in this case.
Yeah, so immediately you've got more mass, which means you've got more energy, which means that anything that happens with greater effect. Secondly, you've got many more occupants. So instead of on a light car, even the taxi, we have 15, you could have 50 or 60 or even 70 people in a bus. In many light motor vehicles and taxis, there are seatbelts. In a bus that's old enough, say before 1999, there might not even be seatbelts at all for the occupants. And then the next and most important thing is the height of center of mass. Buses are higher. They are designed to take your luggage and your accessories at the bottom, or they're typically designed with people sitting in an elevated position. So all of your load's really high. So they do roll over quite easily, and when they do, the impact on the people in that is quite severe. And also because the people sit so close to the edge, to the sides of the bus, the minute it rolls over, it's almost as if those people are being thrown directly onto the tarmac.
Sure. And of course, if indeed the bus was either full to capacity, so taking the maximum amount of passengers, or whether there were people perhaps standing in the bus, which isn't completely unheard of. That factor as well of having people standing, coupled with the fact that I think the older buses, as you say, would likely not have seat belts, which means, you're flung around depending on what the vehicle is doing.
Absolutely. And just to be sure that people understand this, most buses have a plaque inside, or a plate that says you may have so many passengers seated and so many passengers standing.
Right.
So if people are standing, It's kind of normal, it's kind of expected. But most definitely the people are standing are way more exposed, they are unsecured, and it's kind of unnatural to see an environment like this or a crash of this kind if there are people standing that they don't get injured. But also, like with the bus crash that I investigated at Wepener, people were traveling in the bus with their own goods like generators and stuff on their laps, and literally generators. So any suitcases, any personal belongings, etc., all those things become projectiles that essentially move around and injure people as well.
They become weapons, essentially.
Absolutely.
So when we try to look at how we mitigate crashes like this in the future, we've had 3 major crashes in the country just over the past 3 days, Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday, all of which involves a loss of life. Today's been the highest death toll over the past 3 days. What do we do to mitigate these crashes, particularly insofar as buses are concerned, in your opinion, Stan? Is one step to reduce even further the maximum speed of these buses?
Quite frankly, I don't know that a reduction in speed is necessarily a good idea. There's adequate research internationally that shows if there's a difference between the speeds of traffic, positive or negative. So if you have a highway where people are driving 120, whether people drive at 140 or at 100, the risk remains the same. So I don't know that a speed reduction is necessarily the best option. Of course, logic dictates that if I'm traveling slow or even standing still, these things cannot happen. But one wonders when people are unsecured in the bus, or the bus is not properly maintained, or it falls over, whether that's going to have a big impact. But more importantly, I think a huge issue in South Africa is the quality of driver training. Our driver training in South Africa is really predicated upon the right to have a driving license. It's kind of a checkbox scenario. If I check these boxes, I'll get my driving license. The problem is that nothing within the current driver training curriculum addresses emergency situations, sudden emergencies, or even inclement weather, or more importantly, nighttime drive, or even driving in very dense traffic. The next thing I'm surprised by is that we haven't passed legislation yet to say that all vehicles transporting passengers, or perhaps even goods, should be fitted with cameras such as these dash cameras. Already the city of Johannesburg is looking at having all private cameras that look onto roads registered. Why can we not address this in the same way? And then the third and most important thing is actual rolling enforcement. I'm very disturbed by the fact that in South Africa we see a much greater focus on revenue generation as a law enforcement exercise around road safety. We see 10 and 20 police officers at a roadblock collecting fines. If those people were going out and actually stopping these buses, especially if they look suspect, look old, or perhaps don't act safely, then perhaps we detect and intervene earlier. But it's all down to really the road use culture in South Africa, and ours is terrible at the moment, I must confess.
Yeah. I mean, the issue of dash cams is such an important one, isn't it? Because, normal drivers, just anyone driving a car these days, it's in your interest to have a dash cam, because if anything should happen, there's an insurance claim, there's a dispute about what happened, it's quite easy to just go back to your dash cam footage and to give us the version of events. And I imagine for situations like this, where we've heard from eyewitnesses, we've heard from one passenger who survived the crash, I can't imagine that his account of what happened would be accurate, just given, the emotions involved in being in an accident like this. But we rely heavily on the driver surviving, so he can give us his version of events. But the answer to it is having that dash cam footage, taking a look at what happened firsthand.
Absolutely, and not only that, I've done thousands of investigations. In fact, I've just done an investigation for the bus crash that happened in Zimbabwe just 2 weeks ago, where 24 people died. I was involved in the bus crash in Zambia, where 51 people died, and Wepener and all over. And the fact is that in almost every single case, even where the drivers are completely innocent, they kind of naturally gravitate towards trying to protect themselves, which we can understand. Anybody's going to be concerned about the possibility of being held accountable for the death of scores of people. So the driver's version is often not very accurate, because the part of their version is to try to protect themselves. That's why dash cams are so important. In my mind, every vehicle should be fitted with one. And it should be an offence for anybody to tamper with, change, remove, edit, or even delete the footage on those cameras if a crash or an incident occurs. Just imagine if we had dash cameras in all vehicles and we had even just cash in transit heists or major crashes like this. You could have 10 or 20 or 50 vehicles with first-hand best evidence available to the courts. But currently it's simply just not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems like a major, major oversight, particularly in a country like ours, with the rate of accidents and the number of lives lost on our roads.
Absolutely. And even the crimes, just the crimes on our roads,
Yeah.
you know, hijackings, all kinds of incidents, yes.
Stan Bezuidenhout, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for giving us some valuable insights into the state of our roads and just trying to understand what happened or what may have happened in this devastating bus accident from earlier this morning, before 7 o'clock this morning on the R21 towards OR Tambo International Airport. 12 people killed in that crash, 45 others being treated in hospital. Our team is still on the ground tracking that story.